Hello everyone, my name is Corazar, and welcome back to the Vintage Story Guide. It is that time, folks. It is that day. It is time for the World Tour. We are back in the world on this wintry day, and today's aim is we are going to take a tour of our world, and we're going to come back here in a bit, and we're going to take a look at all of the things that we have done, all the progress we've made up to this point. But we're going to cover that from the beginning. And to do that, I should probably start by explaining a few things. One, that is our private rift. No one else is allowed to use it. But what I need to explain is that I have taken a backup of our world, and I have moved the main game save to a different folder, so it's not getting touched. And we are going to actually go into creative mode, and we're going to be able to fly around and take a look at everything from different angles, and just be able to get around faster, because I don't want to have to walk all the way back to spawn just to start this off. So, we're going to go into the console, and we're going to type game mode creative, and there are other ways to do it. You can do /gm1 or 0, but I don't know the numbers and what they correlate to. So, we are now in creative mode, and I think I also want to change some time settings, and we're going to make the days very, very long. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Apparently, some of the commands do not like capital letters. So, what I've done is I have set our game mode to creative, and I have changed the number of hours in the day to 9,000, so it should be noon for a very long time, and yes, it is oddly noon with the sun that low in the sky. We're going to go ahead, and I will meet you back up at spawn. Okay, everyone, we are back up here at the very first place where we set foot in this world. We are back at our original spawn point. And what I'm going to do is, in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, just below the date and time indicator, where it is currently 4,501 hours, I'm going to print the number of the episode that we either started a project, or worked on a project, or were in a particular location. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set the month to June, because taking our tour in winter is kind of gross, so let's do that. Okay, and here we have Eternal June and Eternal Daytime to take a look at what we've done so far. Now, I have changed the time speed to 600 and back to 60 in order to force the game to sort of push out some of the snow and get some of this ice melting, so we have sort of a more June-y, summery environment. The game doesn't like that at all, and I actually just recovered from a couple crashes in a row. What I recommend is, if you are going to be messing around with the time in your game, if you're advancing a lot of months or messing with the speed of the game, I do highly recommend that you do so in a test world, like a backup world like I have done here. That way you don't end up compromising the integrity of your save file. So, this is original spawn though. This is where we first set foot into this world. Aside from that, this place doesn't have much meaning for us. We didn't spend any time here, aside from getting out. It is temporally negative, so we wouldn't want to have a base here anyway. And it's a forest, so it's probably full of wolves. There may be some mushrooms, but that's not really a draw to staying in a place that is going to drive you crazy. So, we set off pretty quickly, and we took a look here and said nope, and we went west initially. And we spent our first night in this little tiny hut with no roof. And what do you know, it's raining. Boy, this sure brings me back. Anyway, we don't really have a connection to this place either, because we just spent one night here staying away from wolves and drifters, and that was that. But it served us well. We continued over, or I guess around these mountains here, and we ended up on this little plain in this sort of little swampy area. Apparently it's still losing some ice. Now, we set up camp here. The first night we didn't have any roof over our head. We just had to sleep beneath the stars, and I don't think we even slept. In fact, I'm pretty sure we spent most of the first night frantically cooking cattail roots, which are a non-renewable source of food. And we did that until we got enough berry bushes and got a chance to do some hunting and gathering of some wild crops. And here's the start of sort of a very temporary berry bush farm. I'm not sure we even actually stayed long enough to pick any berries. Anyway, we returned later to this area in order to turn this into sort of a work camp, because just to the south here we have our very first iron mine, right down here. We're not going to go down here, there isn't really anything of interest, I don't think. But down this chute was our very first iron mine. Before we left here though, we did build this little hut. It has a very tiny interior, but it kept us dry, it kept us somewhat safe from drifters. I think we weathered our first temporal storm here. I think we put stones on the ground. I'm not positive if we did that though. I'm not sure how long we stayed here anymore. And we of course had a much more wonderful door initially. And while we have upgraded some of the amenities here, it is still mostly the same as we left it. We just have this wooden chest and this wooden bed in addition to all the things we had here before. Now, in episode 4, we left this place for good. Aside from coming back for the, work camp stuff for the iron mine, and passing through on the way to the salt that we found up there, as well as occasional other forays looking for crops and fruit trees and other goodies. But we left this place and we went south-southeast. Our journey took a turn for the worse after we made it through these woods here. We made it through unaccosted, but right up ahead we had our first death in this world. Right here, where this pillar is where we took our revenge. Or maybe one of these, both these pillars, I guess. A white wolf ended our life, and I got a very amusing screenshot or screen grab from the video right before it leaped on us for the thumbnail. And so we had to make this journey a second time, and that was frustrating, but ultimately a learning and growing experience. After we made it back here and took our revenge and got our stuff back, we continued our journey until we finally arrived at our new home right on that ridge there. And yes, this ridge became our new home in episode 4. And we have been here pretty much ever since. Now it has changed quite a bit. These pine trees lining the edge and all the decorations and the farms and the buildings, none of them were there. It was just a ridge, a windswept ridge, and us. Our first home sits right here. Now this technically wasn't our first home, as we did have a dirt hut that served us until we actually built this starter home. But that dirt hut no longer exists, and actually this starter home was built around it. We spent a while getting all the materials. There was a lot of clay and grass to gather, and dirt in order to put these mud bricks together, and sand for the light ones. And this starter house has grown with us over time. We did spend some time decorating it. It took us a while to get these windows. And this little home held our entire lives for quite a while. Up until episode 19, when we started our new house. But we did have a cellar down here, which we don't use anymore, but this was sort of our bulk storage. And in here we had our real cellar where we had our food. It is now just pumpkin storage. I think I haven't touched or added to these in a couple in-game years, but a little cheesy. But hey, if we need emergency pumpkins, we know where to find them. We even have here our first set of real armor that we took adventuring on, I think 2 excursions, maybe a little more. But this copper was a brigandine. Yep, this copper brigandine served us well. Rest well, good soldier. Now, right down this way, we had our original farms. Now, they are no longer here, so there isn't much to look at, aside from the trees. Oh, and that's right, we're going to get a preview of what our home will look like in the spring or summer, because these trees have grown, whereas in our actual world, these are still saplings because it's winter and they are stuck in that phase. But we had our original farms right down here. We had, I believe, 3 rows. We had one here, and one here. I think it was, 3 rows of 3 and I used the first of our Terra Preta to populate our farm. We didn't waste any time in getting to work on our barn after our house was done, and this was the first sort of non-mud brick structure we started here, because we achieved the Copper Age while living in that house, and the first thing we built in the Copper Age, aside from I think a few odds and ends for the house, like the upgrades like the shutters and the new door, our first real build was this barn right here. And I am still really happy with how it looks. I think it's a very fine build, and I enjoyed sort of showing you the process I went through in terms of designing it. But in here we have our sheep, and we have our pigs. We have an upper floor to the barn, and I completely forgot to ever fix this block. Whoops. And I really don't do anything up here. This is just sort of extra space that I don't think we'll ever have a need for. I never even put the hay bales up here like I promised, so maybe I should get to that at some point and, you know, fixing this. We also started a lighting revolution over here by beginning the process of getting bees, and these were kind of originally going to just be temporary, but I ended up liking them so much that I figured we should keep them. So I ended up making a second apiary a while later. But these bees have been the source of all of our candles, minus a few that we've gotten from panning bony soil. They are hard workers, and they are an integral part of our estate here. After the barn, we moved on to chickens. And because of the way that chickens are... Oh wow, they don't mind that I'm here. Oh, because we're in creative mode. Right. Because of the way that chickens are, and how skittish they are, we have to keep them a little bit separated from the other animals and from everything else, because we don't want to be spooking them too much. If we spook them, they end up running around like crazy and not actually sitting on their eggs. And this coop sort of used most of the same styles as the barn, or at least some of the same materials. We did at that point have access to stone bricks because we had gone quarrying, and so I made the columns here out of bricks, and I used polished granite for the foundation, and I need to add one block right there. See? Actually one there too. But I do like how our coop came out. And we added some minor details here under the windows with the chisel. And I think, aside from the barn where we did some sort of the 4x4 chiseling, or I'm sorry, 2x2 chiseling, I think this is the first build where we did anything on a finer scale than on the barn. We don't do a whole lot with the chickens. We do have to call their numbers soon though. But every time we need feathers, we do come in here and they provide feathers. Willingly. Happily. Yes. Happily. All of that took us through our first year and our first winter, and toward the end of that, we started planning our new farms. Oh, and we have this charcoal pit here too, but that doesn't really count. Not really a build. But we started our new farms early on in year 2, in the middle of winter, and we have been using them ever since. And each of these plots has 64 farmland, and so we can grow an entire stack's worth of seeds in each of these. Behind each of the farms we have a row, actually 3 rows of Cooper's reeds, and we harvest these on a pretty regular basis because we need them for our bees. And finally, in the spring of year 2, after I spent a very long time baking quicklime in our 10 campfire setup in our old house, we finally broke ground for our real home. It's looking fine with these vines here. And we actually only started the house out to this wall here, and we came to do the bridge and the tower later. But this took, I think, 3 episodes to build, as I recall. We had a sort of breaking ground episode, a getting some basics done, and then getting some of the details done, and the roof. For a few episodes, we kind of had a very empty interior here. In fact, I think we had just sort of a very high ceiling for a while, and we had our bed right over here in this little future book nook. And pretty much none of this was done. It was all roughed in at best, I think we had some of the rooms laid out, and these doors were just, or doorways were just sort of marked up because we didn't have enough plaster for the interior yet. It didn't stop us, though, from moving on to the cellar, because we needed to get mass storage going, because our cellar down in the other house was getting full, as well as the chests that were over there, and we had some chests laying outside with stuff in it. But in episode 22, we came and built this cellar, and of course our food's all rotten here. I forgot to take these dirt blocks out. Since I sped time up and days are really funky, even though these should have lasted 6 years, they only lasted like probably a quarter of a year at most. Same with all these here, full of rot. But we do have our cellars over here, where we keep our food stored. And I think we do still have honey here, yep. We also built this dyeing room over here, and we have used this room exactly once, actually no, twice, because we did it once for our armor, and once for making this reindeer herder fur coat. After the house was built, though, we needed to start thinking about bigger plans, and in episode 25, we started the Tower of Mechanical Power. And look at this thing. That is quite a massive undertaking when you don't have the ability to just buy plaster from builders. That was quite a long build to do. I had a lot of fun making it, but boy, it took me many hours to build this tower and to get all of the windmills in. And I did come back through, I think you saw in the last episode, and I did fill out all of these windows, so they now have trim on them. I came up here, I even added some trim and some sills here for the blocks that were punched out to make room for the windmills. And while we have upgraded our setup in here, since we did begin with the humble quern as our sole machine in here, we have since added the pulverizer, which is the last machine that we added. It's probably done with all the olivine and things. And in the episode after the tower was built, we started work on this blacksmith, and in subsequent episodes we would even get these hub hammers working. But this blacksmith has served us well ever since we built it. We even have a sign. I really enjoyed making this sign, and I'm glad you guys expressed your love for this sign. I think it's a very cute little copper anvil. It's a very expensive sign to make, though. And we did come back through with an editing pass in a later episode where we added these slats in finally. We had sort of a prototype in the original episode, but I wasn't happy with it. And we also did the interior and fancied it up and changed all of the chests out for crates and moved all of our things and added these pink marble top tables for pouring our cast metals. Oh, and we put these grates in too. I haven't really given these a whole lot of thought since we put them in, but they are pretty cool, I think. I like them. In the episode where we built our Tower of Power, we also built our bridge here. I think from start to finish. Yeah, this was done in one episode along with the first episode with the tower. But we built our bridge and got it all decorated, and I am really happy with the bridge. This was something that I had ended up sketching out on a piece of graph paper before I started building it, and I really liked how it looked in my head, and I am really happy I was able to actually translate that into blocks in Vintage Story. Then our series took a turn for the somber, as we decided it was time to finally honor heroes of ages past, the passing of our ancestors, also named Kurzar, and we built this cemetery and mausoleum. The exterior is a little place for graves for other YouTubers whose Vintage Story runs have ended. In the last episode I updated this one. Sorry Nemo, but GG Beyond is actually still kicking to this day. And then down here in the mausoleum is where we have our personal deaths. We have, I think, 5 of them recorded in total. Yes. We have from our first wolf bait, and then everything else was drifters in temporal storms. I think this one may have been a drifter as well. Not positive. Yep, drifter bait. Let's take off our lantern. And there we go. This sort of somber darkness. And at the back we have our vigil candles. Also one for each death. We have more room for candles than we do actual spots in our mausoleum, I think. Yeah, we have 6 per side here. After the cemetery and mausoleum, we finally returned our focus to the house, where we came inside, and we did part of an interior. I wouldn't say we did the whole interior, because even the lower floor still isn't done, but we got in a lot of work. We got most of the interior walls done, we got some chiseling done on the stairs and the trim here, and these door arches. We finally built out the fireplaces, multiple, because we do have the second sort of pseudo-fireplace for the clay ovens. And we even sort of worked the bricks into the wall here. We picked up a whole bunch of these storage vessels of different colors and flavors and types, and we sort of been scattering them around, like up here, for decoration. And I intend to keep doing that as we find more, but I also don't want to oversaturate the area. But back in this room, this is sort of still our room that we come back to when we want to investigate findings and bring back treasure. And I think at some point we'll have to make a dedicated room for that, because this will become a dining room eventually, and I want to get these out of here, but it works for now. In that same episode, we did come and do also most of the second floor. We have our breakfast nook here, where we actually did do an episode intro, sitting right here, eating, I think it was a stack of red currant berries, I think. But we have our fireplaces here, which have a hand-chiseled grate, and again, the fire clay bricks are worked partly into the walls. And we have our master bedroom. Still kind of sparse, if I'm being honest. I would like some decoration for the walls. I wouldn't mind maybe like a carpet or something. And probably like a dresser. Oh, we should chisel a dresser or something here. That'd be fantastic. But we will come back to that in a future episode. We also have a secondary bedroom, which is even more sparsely furnished than our bedroom. And I actually do sleep here a lot, especially in the summer, because I need to use the shorter sleep duration on the hay bed. And then we have this, which is sort of our chisel room. And I think I kind of want to make it officially our chiseling room. I do like using this space for chiseling things, like this pillar of light. And yeah, so we'll have to come back through and gussy up this room a bit and make it sort of feel like a workshop. I want it to look like we do work here. When I was a kid, my mom had a sewing room in a room kind of like this, where the ceiling sort of followed the roof line, and this sort of reminds me of that room growing up in that house as a kid. We also started the third floor in that same episode, but we haven't done anything else with it. We just sort of got the floor in, and we got this sort of end of the staircase wall and ceiling in, and marked out a couple ideas of what to do here, and haven't gotten back to it. So that is still on the radar and in the plans, and I do have an idea now of what I want to do here, especially now that we have a lot more stone types to work with. I've been thinking about doing some really fancy chiseling projects, and they of course are super duper secret plans, but I think you'll all like what the result is. And I hope I do too. This next one isn't so much a build as a game feature that I had been asked about 1,000 times before I finally got around to it, but we finally got our grubby little paws on some fruit trees and planted them around the estate, and I have been keeping up with some of them, as some of these have died while others have grown, and I've been working on getting replacements in for the trees that die before they establish. And I know we have a couple over here, but where are you? Yellow apple. I think we're out of those graftlings. But we scattered a whole lot of fruit trees around the estate, and I am looking forward to being able to harvest those in the coming year. I think we should get fruit this year, although in this save file they are a bit messed up because of me messing around with the time settings in the game, because they should be in pretty much either full bloom or even fruiting at this point. Also in this episode, we came over here and we built this campsite, and at the time, it took a while for the trees to grow, because we built it pretty close to winter, so it took until spring for the trees to grow. But I am really happy with how this place looks now that the trees are grown, especially when there is greenery around. I like our little tent here, a little bit of storage. We got our jug, which has, I don't know, apple cider or something we can heat up over the fire. We have a spare soup pot, and well, these trees didn't make it, I don't think. Nope, both of them died, but we'll come back and replant these at some point. And eventually we'll be able to have, you know, apples and pears we can pick from the trees and munch on them here while we tell stories. But that brings us to the greenhouse, finally. And I enjoyed this build. It was a bit of a challenge because this build ended up being a bit more like that other block game, strictly because you can't use chiseled blocks in its design. The greenhouse has very strict requirements on how it must be built, and that excludes the use of chiseled blocks. So this is sort of a very blocky build. And I think we can do chiseled blocks on the outside, but I don't want to make this build too much bulkier than it already is. It's kind of a chonker already. But I did like the touch of using green glass, as we had just recently gotten olivine from somewhere down south, along with some really fun olivine crystals. And we ended up using that on this build here. In the future, I would like to maybe pick up some of the exotic crops from down south, aside from the soybeans and rice we already have, and plant some of them in here and see how they do. And one commenter correctly pointed out that these are not technically greenhouses, because greenhouses have some form of climate control. These are actually considered hot houses in the real world, because they just don't have the tech for climate control. Although maybe having these little pass-through windows we can open and close here might count. I don't know. Moving on, in a couple different episodes, we finally got to putting some real roads down around our estate. And we started with the roads up here on the ridge before expanding down out front here. And in fact, even in episode 49, I put some finishing touches on the road down here, right across here. And I'm sort of undecided on whether I will put the same gravel on the edges of this road. I do want something, but I'm not sure it'll be gravel. We'll see. But we spent a good amount of time getting these roads in and decorating the area. We got in this sort of central rock and water feature, and now we have a preview of what this would look like with this really sad... Wow, that is the smallest redwood tree you can grow in the game, I'm sure of it. This is a tiny, tiny redwood tree. Well, I hope when we actually have this grow in our real save file that this grows differently and larger, most importantly. But we'll see. But I really like how this place looks in spring and summer. I love the greens mixed with all of the different colored lupins, and I love the shade from the trees. And we'll come back and take a look at this at night with these colored lanterns, giving it a different color glow depending on where you are. But in the latter of those episodes, we actually scattered a whole bunch of lupins around, and we planted more trees, and we put all these bushes around in little groups and clumps to just give some nice definition to our home here. And I think this looks really nice. I think we could use some more clutter in a few places, like from a distance I now see that this area here looks a bit barren, so I could come back through and maybe do a water feature, or maybe like a little spire of rocks sticking up, or both. But I do need to come in here with a sort of another editing pass, and especially right here where I was using this area to grow those red king maples or crimson king maples. I need to sort of fill this in and get this a little bit less bland, I think. And we also worked on the first of our lighting in the latter of those episodes. I think it was episode 46, I want to say. And we got these pedestals done and used the Workbench Extended mod to copy them, and we now have lighting on all of our roads. Now, we're sort of skipping around a bit because some of these bled into other features, like it was hard to talk about the roads without talking about the landscaping. But in episode 43, we built our second set of farms, and final set of farms, I should say, as well. We shouldn't need more farmland than this. We have now a total of 8 plots of farmland, all with 64 tiles worth of growing, and these give us far more produce than we can reasonably eat, even with our animals chowing down on the flax. But we also put in this road shortly after that, and finished off the rest of this area along with the rest of that landscaping episode. And in episode 46, we also finally made a sign and christened our home Lupine Ridge. And I am still happy with how the sign came out, and I love the name for our home, and I'm really happy that all of you seem to have liked it too. Now, going back in time a little bit, from the sign at least, we do have the Pottery Shack. And this was a build they used to sort of showcase how to plan and construct a build. And that was due to a couple requests I'd gotten from some commenters who wanted some help in how to sort of make a build look less blocky and less flat. And as you can see, we've sort of done that here. I mean, we have all these foundational bits that stick out. We have the walls that are popped in by half a block, and we have these sills and awnings that stick out just a little bit. And all these things together help give the build just sort of that extra pop it needs to not be so flat. And as far as the roofline is concerned, we really managed that by having this tower pop out of the house. And even though that's really geometric here still, by being centered on the house, from pretty much every angle, it really changes the build's appearance by having this, roof sticking out. And then just to sort of offset that symmetry of being in the middle of the build, this firelight chimney off to one side helps to sort of make sure this doesn't seem too regular and too symmetrical. But this is now where we do all of our clay firing. I have a pit kilns full of clay bricks apparently. And this was actually kind of funny because I got yelled at a few times for rebuilding my dirt clay firing huts. And so that sort of spurred me to make the tutorial build about the Pottery Shack. And we did do the interior on that same episode. And we have the tower here, which really doesn't have much to it. We talked about how this could have maybe been a bell tower for a chapel, or maybe it was a tower for making bullets, if this were a world that had bullets, back when they had musket balls and they would just sort of drop lead through a sieve from the top of a tower. But that is our Pottery Shack. And then in episode 45, we finally returned to working on the house, and we built this 3 seasons bonsai room from start to finish. It was a 1-episode complete room build, and I am really happy with how this came out. I mean, I love the house, and as a whole, the house is my favorite build I've ever made so far in Vintage Story. But this room just makes me extra happy for some reason, and I think it has to do with all the greenery. I have always loved trees and green things. It is my favorite color after all. And just this room makes me feel a lot more peaceful when I'm in it. It also doubles as our fuel storage, and we have a somewhat treacherous stack of fuel. It's 13 feet high, apparently. But yes, this is our bonsai room, and I am in love with it. I even did some pretty serious chisel work on these tables and these shelves over here, with the sort of wrought iron angled piece supporting the wood shelf. And yes, that is our bonsai room. I keep falling in this water. I think we're not quite done with this room yet. I do want to probably come through at some point with an edit and maybe chisel up a little bit of this roof here, just like a quarter of a block, so that the windows or the glass is actually supported visually by the roof blocks, kind of like I did right here. But actually I'd probably raise these up too. Which reminds me, I do want to come through at some point, maybe. It's sort of less important now, I think, because I've seen it so often and we see the roof from a distance so much, but I would like to come through with the 4x4 chisel and just make these roofs a little smoother. You know, take out this section here of each block, and that would just make the roof that much less blocky, I think. But from a distance, it's kind of hard to notice, especially from the ground where you don't get to see all the detail. Now, we have a few places to visit that are not part of our home here, and those are our waystations and what's beyond them. So throughout this playthrough, we have found a number, finally, a number that is not 0 or 1, of translocators that take us to faraway lands. Oh, and I have these collapsed chests here just sitting here still. So let's take a look. We're going to start from this one because it's closest to home, and we will work our way up to the one to the north, and we'll also probably visit our salt mine that I haven't been to in a while, actually. But in episode 47, we discovered this translocator after a long and arduous trek through a whole bunch of caves. I cut out most of the episode, or most of my recording, but all of these caves to the west of our house here that are now colored in other colors than gold. So I went through this green cave and this red cave and this blue cave, and I think there was one more. I went through one up here too that I don't think I changed the color of because I ended up finding it was just a really small dead end. I went through so many caves till we got to this one right here, and finally found a translocator close to home. So we'll go through and we'll talk about what we found on the other side. Hope their game doesn't crash. And here we are. So we found some basalt over here, or basalt, depending on where you're from. And this area is a good distance north of home. We are at negative 5,000 on the z-axis and 8,000 on the x-axis. So we are really far east and very far north of our home. Interestingly, it is actually warmer here than at home. And we haven't done much exploring here. In fact, we've done pretty much no exploration here, aside from checking out what were the ruins down below the ground here, which are no longer there. Wonder who could have done that. And we have visited that trader over there. Just once. He's a commodities trader. Nothing too special. This trader is probably about equidistant in terms of total travel time as the commodities trader on the opposite side of our forest. But through this door and down this really ugly path, we have the second translocator. Through here, we found, finally, some bauxite. And we can see it already. Bauxite galore. And just like our first translocator, or the one just previously, not our first one that we found, we haven't done much exploration here either. We've mined out a good chunk of bauxite, and we have built our waystation up here on the surface, but aside from that, we haven't done any exploration. This whole place is pretty much completely unknown to us. And it's also reasonably warm here. Interesting. But this is the super far north. We are now no longer super far to the east. We're actually very close to 0 on the x-coordinate, comparatively speaking. But we are almost 10,000 blocks north. In fact, we're only 10 off 10,000 blocks north, so there we go. We are 10 kilometers north of spawn now. Look at that. And maybe we'll come through and do some exploration up here, but currently the far north doesn't have a lot to interest me. I don't even think we're that far north, technically speaking. I think we still have a ways to go before we start seeing things like polar bears and the Aurora Borealis. And those are two things that are unique to the north, but I don't think they're really worth making a special trip for just to go see them and maybe get killed by the bears. Oh, there's an Arctic hare. So we might actually have polar bears up here, and maybe even the auroras. So I'm going to head back, and I will meet you all far to the north of our home, where we will go through the first translocator we found, and talk about what's on the other side of that. And right here is where we found our first translocator. We were doing a pretty wide sweep just to sort of expand our map at the time. I think we were looking for traders, and we happened upon this cave right down here. We did a real quick explore, hey guys, and ended up finding a translocator. Actually, I'll just go there now. Right over here. And there we have it. And this was the first translocator we found. I was overjoyed to find it, and even more overjoyed to find out that it took us far to the south. The south is much more interesting to me than the north because there is a lot more content for it. Now, we're not in the deep south yet. We actually are kind of in a temperate south zone, like, I don't know, maybe think of being in like Florida, maybe not even that far south. But we have actually done quite the exploration here, and we have brought back some unique materials from the area. To the south here, we have a forest where we have harvested redwood and bald cypress wood and seeds and brought them back to our home. And we also finally, far to the north, found our first luxuries merchant, and that gave us, at long last, some access to colored glass as well as some more exotic goods, the Forlorn Hope armor, I think amok tabletops, and we can also maybe eventually buy an echo chamber from him. That being said, we have also found a lot of resources here. There is lead and iron and sulfur aplenty in this area, and we have found some of that back home, but it seems to be even more plentiful here in terms of some of those materials. Now, I do intend to do some more adventuring here because I would like to explore the deep south, and I prefer to do that without having to use my feet to get there, because I did that in a previous single-player game. Wow. And it took me like 3.5 days of constant playing and walking to actually explore. Oh boy, that's weird. So I do want to come through and explore these caves more fully, because just like our other translocators, there's a good chance, or I should say there is a chance, that there could be another translocator here. And with any luck, it might take us even farther south. I mean, it also might not, but, you know, one can hope. The last place of note I want to showcase that is outside the bounds of our ridge is we did finally stumble, and I mean stumble, across an open-air salt mine right down here. And I realized I forgot to grab this lead ore. Oh well. But we finally found a reliable source of salt that doesn't require us to spend 1,000,000 rusty gears at the trader right near our base. And if you look at that, it's also right next to the glowworms. But this deposit has both halite, which we can grind into salt, as well as sylvite, which we can grind into potash and use to fertilize our fields. And we've done so for half of our fields so far. And that is very good for potassium-loving crops, especially flax, because it permanently increases the amount of potassium that the soil can hold. Now, that is not an exhaustive list of all the discoveries we've made along the way, but I wanted to hit just a couple of the big ones that we had found outside our home. I wasn't planning on going over every copper and iron deposit, nor every, say, I don't know, set of mushrooms we found. That isn't really important. But the big things, translocators and salt, are integral to playing Vintage Story a lot of the time, especially the translocators, and so I wanted to just sort of showcase them. Now I want to go back to our home and take a look at how the place looks at night. Want to come with me? Okay, here we are, and let's go ahead and we're going to make it night. That's better. Now I know there is a lighting glitch where sometimes these colored lanterns don't actually keep their color sometimes. Yep, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and reset these real quick. And there we go. That is much more like it. Let's take our lantern off too. Here we go. So this, I guess, is a preview of what our central area will look like. I guess we'll have to trim these leaves back eventually. Here we go. Get lost. But yes, with these colored lights, it sort of gives a neat little sort of fairy glow to the area. And I might actually come in at some point after the tree has grown here, the redwood, and once it's grown taller, I would like to actually put some more lanterns higher up, so the trees are always illuminated. I think that would be really cool. But in the most recent episode before this one, episode 49, I did come through and add a few finishing touches to the area. For one, we made these new lampposts, and I think I like them. I was kind of originally going to go for one where the lantern would be stuck either to the side or to the bottom of an overhanging piece, but I kind of decided against that, at least for now. I could come through and try that, but this is what we have for the time being. I kind of liked how this sort of looks like the smaller ones we have scattered around with the oil lamps on them, like over there. And we came through with the last few details, like adding these vines, as well as this water feature right over here, which I am very pleased with. Especially now that the cypresses have grown. They're pretty nice. But yes, this is what our home will look like in the spring and summer at night. The gentle glow of our path lighting and the somewhat brighter glow of our lanterns. And I am very happy with how our home is shaping up. Everything we've seen today represents 50 episodes and about 280 hours of life here in Vintage Story, plus another 2 or 3 hours per episode of editing, rendering, and quality control. It has been an incredible journey so far, and I'm grateful to all of you who are along for the ride. Whether you've been with me from the start, discovered this channel later and binged your way through the episodes, or you happen across this series long after it comes to an end, thanks for walking with me on this adventure. Your love and encouragement has given me more fuel for my creative engine than I ever imagined. Special thanks to everyone who leaves a like, drops a comment, or subscribes to the channel. You've made all this possible. Well everyone, that is about all we have time for in this episode of the Vintage Story Guide. I would thank you all so much for joining me on this journey through our builds today in this world tour. And thank you for joining me in this journey in general, as we have slowly but surely built up our home here on Lupine Ridge. We will be back next episode, as normal, back in the survival version of this world, and we will be moving ahead with steel making. I hope you're as excited for that as I am. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in an episode during a build montage or maybe a mining montage, leave it in the comments with the hashtag 20questions. If you play computer games and would like to support the channel, consider using my partner link next time you're shopping on the Humble Store, on screen now and in the description below. As always, my name has been Corzar. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.